Well, hello and welcome to another one of Professional Advisors' video interviews in the Advisor Champion series. I'm Julian Marr, editor of Professional Advisor, and today I'm talking with Alex Barry, head of UK distribution at Legg. Hello, Alex.
Good morning, Julian.
We have a standard question to kick off with, two-parter. I shall get it right one day. What do you see as the best and worst case scenarios for the future of UK financial advice?
I think let's start on the worst case because I find it really hard to see this playing out, but I will touch on that first. I think the worst case scenario would be further regulatory issues coming down the pipe. Maybe you see some mis-selling scandals in the DB transfers, and that leads to a whole additional raft of regulation in an industry which is already kind of over-regulated, arguably, and struggling to deal with that. Yeah, exactly. But I think that would be the worst case. But I find it hard to see that playing out. I think the environment for advice in the UK is probably as good now on a 10-year view as it's ever been before. I think, given what you've seen in terms of pension deregulation, given the demographic profile of the country, given how well the industry has adapted and evolved since RDR, I think the industry is actually in very, very rude health at the moment. And I think it will continue to grow. The need for advice is omnipresent. It's never going to go away. And I think it's actually very exciting times to be involved in the industry right now.
That's a nice upbeat start to this interview then. Let's focus you personally then. How did you get into financial services? And if you hadn't, what do you think you'd be doing?
Well, initially I tried to get involved in politics, actually. So my first role was working in political lobbying, but I think people would understand that I didn't really necessarily enjoy the kind of people that I was dealing with or what was being involved. And so I soon moved out of politics, which was probably a wise decision. And then I was given the opportunity to work at Fidelity as part of their brokerline team, and that was sort of in the mid-90s, and started out from there.
And in the alternative universe, where would you be? Oh, I suppose back in politics, maybe, is that?
That's a really good question. I always think Peter Crouch gave the best answer to that question, but I probably couldn't give that. It's something that I've never really thought too much about. I guess probably politics would be where I would be.
Well, we'll see how the rest of your answers go through this interview then, shall we? So clearly you've been dealing with advisors for 20 plus years now. From your experiences, what do you think they're doing well? What do you think they could be doing better?
I think, as I said, I think the industry is in very good health. I think if you go back 10 years, the industry did have its problems, it did have its issues, but I think RDR has been in terms of a sort of a cleansing piece of legislation, whilst painful at the time and then run to it, it has promoted a greater level of professionalism. It has promoted more transparency, better pricing and better deal for clients. So I think actually in terms of speaking as the industry as a whole, they provide a very good service for clients. I think it's interesting. I spent part of my previous 4 years spent working in America, and it's a very different business model over there. But much of the sort of strong practice you see over there is replicated over here. And I think as an industry, obviously no one's perfect, but most of what takes place is very good and very sound.
Did you say they could be doing better? Do you think, or something?
Well, I think. Is anyone perfect apart from yourself, Julian? Probably not.
Clearly, yeah.
No, there's always areas for improvement, of course. I think but I think at this point in time, it's the industry we're not necessarily allowing it to flourish as much as it could do because of the sort of regulatory focus that's gone on and the increased burden people have. Now, one would hope that we can get through that sort of process in terms of and get to a state where the regulator is happy with the state of play as it is, and then allow the industry to develop and evolve. I think in terms of how it develops and how it evolves, clearly the big question is, how technology is embraced and the role that technology plays in the industry going forward. Because that's an absolutely key question. As an industry, we are going to be very disrupted, as every other industry will be. And it's a question of how technology is used, embraced, is really what's going to shape the future for many people, many businesses.
Well, you may come back to this next question then, because at PA we're all about sort of pragmatic approach to business. What would be your top tip for advisors to help them run a better business? Is there anything you pass on there?
Well, having never run an advisory business myself, I think it's hard for me to give them advice. But I think in terms of just basic sound principles, focus on your sort of area. I think it's important for a business to be very focused on what it's trying to do, what it's trying to deliver, and its areas of expertise, and don't stray too far from that. If you keep on doing that and do what you're good at, then I think people are going to be in a good state. I also think from a looking forward, there are things perhaps which are becoming more relevant and more pertinent than has been the case in the past. I mean, if I was running an advice business now, I'd be very much focused on goals-based wealth management, which is, I think the notion of, a benchmark, be it, the FTSE or, a 60-40 balance benchmark is, whilst relevant, it's probably more relevant in the institutional space than it is in the retail space. Investors invest for a reason, and that varies from investor to investor, but it's incumbent upon us to understand, or on advisors to understand what the goals of their client are and manage those portfolios accordingly, because ultimately that's what people are investing for.
Sure. Can't get away without sort of talking about costs, but maybe in the context of value for money. How would you define value money when it comes to financial advice?
Well, I think it's a really interesting question. I mean, I'd put it back on you. I mean, there's a lot in the press around, costs, and in the eyes of not yourselves, but certainly in the sort of the broader press, the argument is that, cheap is best. Now, if I scratch my head and think about which products I buy because they're the cheapest ones I can come up with petrol and malt vinegar I use to clean my house. Very few other products that I would buy just on price alone. If I've got an issue medically, if I have an issue, say I need to get a lawyer, I'm not going to get the cheapest lawyer. I'm probably not going to get the most expensive one, but I'm prepared to pay it. And I think it's the same in financial services. Advisors provide very, very important service to clients, and clients should be prepared to pay for that. Now, how much they pay is dependent upon a number of variables, but I think we should get away from this issue of just because it's cheap, it's good. I mean, people don't go on the cheapest holiday. People don't go to the cheapest lawyer. People shouldn't be going to the cheapest financial advisor. We shouldn't be ashamed of charging for our services. Now, obviously, what we have to charge is a fair fee, but ultimately, there doesn't need to be a race to the bottom, because what we're doing is we're solving complex problems for people which they can't do themselves, and therefore people need to be prepared to pay for that. And I think now that argument is probably more borne out post RDR. Again, it's an easier argument to have.
While we're on the definition trail, risk, how would you explain risk yourself to someone who doesn't work in financial?
Well, I tried to do this the other night actually to my cousin, who works in the media, and failed spectacularly. So I think it demonstrates the value of advice, because one of the issues we have in the UK is that people are not financially savvy. I think the average financial literacy is around that of a 9-year-old, and people don't understand. I mean, this is my cousin. She's well educated, went to university, she's worked in the media for 20 years, and she doesn't understand how financial markets work, financial risk works. I think, you have to come back to the basic principles and ask people, if they were to give you, as the advisor, say, £1,000, what would the attitude be if that money fell by 30% in a year? That's probably the best way of doing it, but it's a very hard question to do.
Probably didn't answer this question a lot. I think it's going to be so important going forward, is we're introducing fresh blood into the advice sector.
Yeah.
Maybe you can incorporate your US experience into this, but how do you believe the advice sector should go about attracting the next generation?
This is a really interesting question, and one that's been around for a long time. I've been involved in this industry for about just over 20 years, and when I first started, meeting with IFAs and going to presentations, the audience was always, very sort of, senior in terms of years, average age of around 60, and very male-dominated, and that is still the case today. Interestingly, as you said, I spent some time in America, and it's the case there as well. So it's not a UK-specific problem. I think it's a problem of the industry, and I think part of the problem stems from the fact that many of the people with, significant amounts of money are of that kind of age, and so it's very hard for a 35-year-old to relate to a 60-year-old. I think in terms of what firms need to do, I think that the onus would fall maybe on the bigger firms to introduce, graduate trainee programs, to introduce internships, to maybe sponsor people through university, to develop courses in conjunction with universities. I think that's one way of doing it. I think the second thing that you do see this a little bit in the US is trying to operate on a teams basis, where if you have a family, a family as a client, you try and match off the different generations within your own business. So, the sort of the patriarch and the matriarch deal with the elderly, or the experienced advisor, if you like, and then the kids deal with some of their own age. Because it's a big problem, certainly here, when you go through probate. I haven't seen the stats, but I know they're pretty high. The number of people who would then move from their parents' financial advisor to someone else is extremely high. and so that's a problem that occurs here, and it occurs elsewhere as well. So I think maybe one way of trying to solve for that is by matching off on a teams basis. So you don't suddenly get a call from an individual you've never met before. Yeah. You don't know.
This is a question that provokes a wide array of answers. But if you were head of the FCA for a day, just one day, what would you do?
I'd spend it with advisors. Because I think the FCA doesn't get out of bed in the morning trying to make advisors' lives a misery. Okay, they recognise the need for a thriving financial advice sector in the UK. The government can't support people ad infinitum anymore, so we need to be able to have financial advisors to help people make the right decisions financially and to be able to live, in the manner to which they become accustomed. Having said all that, I don't think if you look at some, you've seen it this week, and they're maybe doing a U-turn on PRIPS. So there is an acceptance that perhaps they've gone too far, but I think they're not spending enough time engaging with people and really understanding the issues that they're facing, what they're trying to do, and just to develop a better understanding of the business and the issues it's faced. Because it's all well and good, sitting in your ivory tower and adopting principles and expecting people to do them. But I don't think I'm sure they try to see advisors, but I think if it was me, just for one day, I think that's what I just spend the entire day talking to different types of advisors.
Good answer. We call this Advisor Champion, so we ask you this question: which character from history or fiction would you pick as an Advisor Champion, and why?
This is a very difficult question.
Yep.
So we are now, today, you probably don't know this, but I do, I'm very aware of this, the World Cup is starting today. It's very exciting. So I thought I would have to pick someone from history. Now, as a proud North Londoner, I think I have to pick Arsene Wenger, actually, the former Arsenal manager. Now, you may laugh, Julian, but Arsene Wenger is, advisors need to be able to relate to their clients. Arsene Wenger is able to relate to people. Advisors, we've talked about the gap, the generation gap. Arsene Wenger has been managing young men for many, many years, and so is able to deal with people from different generations. He's always eschewed financial prudence as well. When Arsenal, perhaps we haven't done as well as we could have done, but he's always talked about balancing books. So there is that financial sort of savvy there. He's loyal as well. He's stayed with his own club for many years, and he's loyal. So he's loyal to his own clients, his supporters. So I think it's a weak answer, but given where we are in terms of the time of year, that would be Arsene Wenger would be my response.
I suppose he's at a junction in his career now. Maybe there's going to take a little left turn into advice instead. Final question. There is similar sort of subject. How do you think advisors can best be their own champions going forward?
It's a very interesting question. I think advisors. I think it's not necessarily down to individuals per se. It's about the industry. I think the industry has got a PR job to do, because financial advisors, fund managers will all kind of bunk together, with bankers, and we're just bad. And I think we need to be collectively trying to improve financial education. We need to be offering the best level of service we can to our clients, and also I think evolving with the world. I mean, we haven't really touched on how much technology is going to change people's lives, but I think from an advisory perspective, I think you have to embrace the technology and move with it, not be scared by it, because I think people are the world is changing. But I think if advisors can do those kind of things, offer the right kind of a service, then things will improve in terms of the perception. It just takes time. Perception is sadly reality, but perception is built up over a long period of time. But I think what you've seen in recent years with the changes in regulation, with particularly RDR, I think financial services is getting there. We're not there. It takes time, but the fact of the matter is that people need advisors. They will always need advisors, and by delivering a good level of service, by delivering fair value to clients, then that in itself will help improve the image of the industry over a period of time.
Well, we started optimistically, we finished optimistically. I think that's brilliant. Thank you so much for talking to us, Alex.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
And thank you very much for watching. Please do look out for further Advisor Champion videos.